Let me ask you something. When was the last time you washed your hands? This morning? An hour ago? 5 minutes ago? Now imagine washing your hands in 10,000 BC. You can't. There's no soap. There's no running water. There's no hand sanitizer. There's nothing. And here's the thing that will blow your mind. Your ancestors lived like this for thousands of years. They didn't have soap. They didn't have showers. They didn't have deodorant. And somehow, they survived. So how did they do it? That's what we're about to find out. And trust me, the answer is way stranger than you think. Let's go way back. Before soap was invented, people still wanted to get clean. They always have. Because nobody likes feeling dirty. But here's the problem. Water alone doesn't really work. It washes away dirt, sure. But it can't dissolve the oily grime that builds up on your skin. So ancient people had to get creative. Some of the earliest humans didn't use water at all. In some places, people used sand and sunlight instead. They would rub sand on their skin to scrub off the dirt. In other places, they used clay. Fuller's earth, a type of clay, was rubbed on the skin and clothes to absorb grease. Imagine that. You're covered in dirt. So you rub more dirt on yourself. Then you hope it works. And honestly, it kind of did. But then something happened. Someone discovered soap. And the story of how that happened is incredible. Here's where it gets interesting. The first evidence of soap comes from ancient Babylon. Around 2800 BC, archaeologists found soap-like material in clay jars from the ruins of Babylon. The jars had writing on them. They said the material was made by boiling animal fats with ashes. But here's the twist. That first soap wasn't for bathing. It was for styling hair. That's right. The very first soap in history was basically ancient hair gel. The Babylonians used it to make their hair look good. Not to get clean. Not to prevent disease. To look fashionable. The Egyptians took it further. By 1500 BC, the Egyptians had figured out how to make soap for cleaning bodies and treating skin diseases. They mixed animal and vegetable oils with alkaline salts. The Egyptians were actually quite clean. They bathed regularly. They invented early forms of deodorant by mixing spices like citrus and cinnamon. But even they didn't fully understand what soap could do. And then came the Greeks. The Greeks didn't like soap. Well, they didn't hate it. But they preferred not to use it on their bodies. Instead, they had a method that sounds absolutely terrifying. They would scrub their skin with blocks of clay, sand, pumice, and ashes to remove dirt and grime. Then, they would cover themselves in olive oil. Then, they would exercise, often after strenuous athletic activity in the gymnasium. Then, they would take a curved metal blade called a strigil and scrape the oil, sweat, and dirt off their skin. The standard design of a strigil is a curved blade with a handle, all made of metal, typically bronze or iron. The wealthy had slaves to wield the strigils and clean their bodies. Imagine that. You scrape your skin with a knife to get clean. That's how the Greeks did it. But here's something wild. The ancient Greeks and Romans valued the sweat and grime of champion athletes so much that they would actually purchase it. The scraped-off body grime was called gloios in Greek and strigimentum in Latin. Admirers would collect these scrapings, anointing themselves in the hope of absorbing the vitality and health associated with the athletes. Wealthy Roman women would even acquire vials of gladiator filth, using it like a luxury facial cream. And it wasn't just them. The Romans also preferred oil and scraping. They thought soap was a barbarian invention. But the Romans did something else incredible. They built public baths. Massive ones. The Romans took bathing to an extreme. They built huge public baths called thermae, community centers that defined what it meant to be Roman. Some could hold over 1,600 people at once. By the 4th century AD, Rome had nearly 1,000 public bath buildings. Nearly every town and village throughout the Roman Empire had at least one public bath. The bathing process was elaborate. Bathers would first work up a sweat through athletic activity on the palestra, the exercise ground. Then, they would enter the caldarium, the hot room. The floor was so hot that bathers wore sandals with wooden soles to protect their feet from burning. Then they moved to the tepidarium, the warm room, where servants would scrape them with strigils. Then the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. Finally, a massage with oil and perfume. But Roman baths were more than just places to get clean. They were social hubs. Friends would gather and gossip. Business was discussed. There were snack shops, meeting rooms, libraries, and gardens. They were the ancient equivalent of a modern health club or YMCA. The Romans invented indoor plumbing using lead pipes. In fact, the word plumbing comes from the Roman word for lead, plumbum. They built aqueducts to bring water into cities. They built sewers to take waste away. They even used urine to clean their clothes. The ammonia in urine acted as a powerful detergent. The Romans were the cleanest civilization in history. And then everything fell apart. When the Roman Empire fell in 467 AD, everything changed. The aqueducts stopped flowing. The sewers stopped working. The public baths were abandoned. And people in Europe just stopped bathing. For centuries. This is hard to imagine today. But it's true. People became filthy. Their food was unclean. Their homes were unsanitary. Why did they stop? There were several reasons. First, the infrastructure was gone. No more aqueducts. No more running water. Second, the church had problems with public baths. People were naked there. Sometimes things happened that the church didn't approve of. Third, people started believing that bathing was actually dangerous. They believed disease came from bad air, miasma. They thought bathing opened your pores and let the bad air in. So they covered themselves in filth as protection. They barely changed their clothes. They barely washed. They barely cleaned their homes. And they got sick. Really sick. In 1347, something terrible happened. The Black Death arrived in Europe. In just 5 years, it killed 1/3 of Europe's population. 25 million people. And here's the thing, they made it worse. The medical experts of the time gave advice that seems insane to us today. They told people, don't bathe, it opens your pores. Burn greenwood, laurel, and wormwood to purify the air. Don't eat pork, old beef, or fat meat. Sleep at night, not during the day. Avoid fasting and excessive abstemiousness. Be chaste. Men must preserve chastity as they value their lives. Not one of them said, wash your hands. Towns did try to clean up. But they focused on the wrong things. They banned people from dumping waste in the streets. They built public toilets over rivers. They employed people to clear rubbish. They checked the quality of meat before it was sold. They even banned old clothes from being brought into cities because they thought clothes could carry bad air. But they never told people to wash their hands. They couldn't. They didn't know. It would take another 500 years for someone to figure it out. And when they did, they were destroyed for it. In 1847, a Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something. In one maternity ward, women were dying from childbed fever at alarming rates. In another, where doctors washed their hands between patients, they lived. Semmelweis told doctors to wash their hands with chlorinated lime before examining patients. The death rate plummeted from 18% to less than 1%. He had just proven that hand washing saves lives. And the medical community destroyed him. His colleagues mocked him. His boss blocked his promotion. He was forced out of his job. He was committed to an insane asylum. He died there, beaten by the staff. All because he told people they were dirty. He was right. They were. Semmelweis died in 1865. He never saw his work accepted. But eventually science caught up. Louis Pasteur proved that microorganisms cause disease. Joseph Lister introduced antiseptic surgery. And finally, people understood. Hand washing with soap and water didn't become a standard guideline in hospitals until the 1980s. Think about that. The knowledge that could have saved millions during the Black Death wasn't fully accepted until less than 50 years ago. So here's the question. Why did we forget? Why did it take thousands of years for humans to understand what a bar of soap could do? The answer is simple. We couldn't see the invisible. For most of human history, we didn't know germs existed. We couldn't see them. We couldn't smell them. We didn't even know they were there. So we blamed bad air. We blamed sin. We blamed everything except the thing that was actually killing us. The Babylonians invented soap for hair. The Egyptians used it for skin diseases. The Greeks scraped themselves clean with metal blades. The Romans built massive baths. And then Europe stopped bathing for centuries. All because they couldn't see the invisible enemies. But you can. You can see the bacteria on your hands. You can see the germs on your phone. You can see the invisible enemies. So next time you wash your hands, think about this. You're not just cleaning yourself. You're doing something that would have saved millions of lives. You're doing something that destroyed a man who discovered it 170 years too early. You're seeing the invisible. And that's something your ancestors couldn't do. If you found this video interesting, if you enjoyed learning about the strange and surprising ways our ancestors survived, then please consider subscribing. This channel is dedicated to exploring the forgotten corners of human history. We ask one question in every video. What did humans do before we invented everything? Every week, we release new documentaries about the things you take for granted before they existed. So if you want to learn more, hit that subscribe button. It's right below this video. Turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new video. Leave a comment below. Tell us, what surprised you most about the history of soap? And if you enjoyed this, please share this video with one person who needs to hear it. Because the more people who know this story, the more we all remember. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.